5 generations, 139 years on my farm, 50,375 days, and 3 children who believe in me and you to save their futures.
The centre of London this morning, cold and wet, but they came in their thousands. And Whitehall was soon echoing to the anger of an industry bent on staring down the government over the emotive issue of inheritance.
So buckle up, Starmer, because you're not going to win this fight.
Breaking Starmer's secret arrest plan. Exposed as King Charles steps in to defend the people, it started with the implementation of what Starmer's administration referred to as the National Compliance and Regulation Enforcement Order, a comprehensive collection of policies intended to ensure public cooperation with urgent sustainability goals and democratic preservation.
There is a huge row now over these numbers and the impact this will actually have. The farming unions insist the Treasury has got its figures wrong, and the sense of distrust runs deep in this dispute.
Over the budget's new inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million, where previously they'd been exempt. And however much the government insists that with additional allowances, only around 500 farm estates a year would be affected, despite ministerial denials, there are cries of betrayal amidst claims Labour reneged on old pre-election assurances.
Did you ever anticipate that you would get this from this government?
No. They had stayed.
According to official announcements. In reality, it took on an altogether other form. Farmers across reported unexpected government officers showing up with legal orders to check water access permits, fuel consumption, and animal counts. For infractions as trivial as not reducing their tractor usage by a specific percentage, rules they hadn't even been adequately warned about. Rural labourers were carried away in handcuffs one by one. In the meantime, voters in cities who had publicly questioned Labour's proposals online were reported for engaging in public non-compliance behaviour. A number of them were introduced under the recently enacted Regulation Clause 7A, which permitted arrests without bail for alleged digital insubordination. It was deemed Orwellian by critics. Supporters referred to it as necessary for national cohesion.
The example I've given is a typical example of parents wanting to pass on a farm to one of their children. And in those cases, when you look at all the thresholds available...
The government says a small number of farms will be affected.
They are totally, completely and utterly wrong. They haven't got a clue.
That means that only farms over the value of £3 million will be affected by the changes, and therefore the vast majority of farms will be unaffected.
Yet their numbers are steadily declining. The King reportedly got up in the middle of the briefing and demanded explanation as soon as he received an intelligence update on the arrests. He became furious when he was informed that the arrests were genuine and still going on. He hadn't raised his voice since the early days of the COVID issue, according to palace staff. However, things were different this time. It had nothing to do with policy. The people were the focus of this. Some British people who had voted for Starmer himself were being held without due process because they refused to comply with ambiguous, bureaucratically complex commands. "This is not governance," the King cried, his fists slamming against the table. "This is coercion." According to palace officials, the King requested an urgent private audience with Prime Minister Starmer, despite the monarchy's customary apolitical stance. The Voice, firm enraged. Experts in constitutional law instantly started to speculate about the possibility of a rare royal intervention at this time. Although the King does not have official legislative authority, there are discreet, little-utilised procedures that enable him to challenge, postpone, or even stop government activities in extreme situations. Many thought this was one of those times. Starmer, however, was not going to back down. Later that afternoon, he justified the arrests as unfortunate but essential at a chilly, pre-arranged press conference. He asserted that the nation's compliance erosion posed a threat to democracy itself.
She has to be willing to listen. She has to be willing to accept they've got it wrong. Now, I know that's a big ask of a government, but I don't believe that any well-considered policy had the human impact. First of all, can I say welcome to Church House?
The latter teed up by union battle cries to an eager audience in a Westminster hall. So many in number, they had to do this 3 times.
The unintended consequences that sit right at the heart of this policy. And I'm sorry, but that is not acceptable.
He declared, "We cannot let individual preferences take precedence over group advancement." The nation was rocked by the comment, Videos of farmers being hauled away, voters yelling at plainclothes officers, and people holding up posters that said, "Is this still Britain?" went viral on social media. Opposition leaders in Westminster started to call for clarification. With a booming voice, Nigel Farage seized the podium to denounce Starmer for what he described as a Soviet-style betrayal of the British people. Liberal Democrats want a thorough parliamentary investigation because they were similarly concerned. A number of Labour members of Parliament even started to discreetly distance themselves from Starmer's enforcement task group. The King's rage had not subsided when he returned to the palace. He was reportedly pacing for hours, while phoning human rights specialists, previous prime ministers, and constitutional advisors. He was worried about what this meant, not just about the arrests. He allegedly told a senior advisor, "We tear the very soul from this country's democracy if we allow this." Protests broke out in big cities overnight, cheering, "Free the farmers." Thousands of people gathered in front of the municipal council office in Birmingham. "Release the electorate." A grandmother was pushed aside by a police officer in a widely shared video after she demanded that her son, who had been jailed for planning a peaceful resistance barbecue in Yorkshire, be released. A modest policy disagreement turned into a national emergency. The King spoke to the country the following morning. "Britain is a nation built on liberty and lawful dissent," he remarked in a rare public statement, his voice unwaveringly solid and his countenance solemn. "It is intolerable to arrest our countrymen without explanation, empathy, or openness. I implore the government to promptly re-evaluate its course of action." The webcast caused a stir in Parliament and garnered millions of views. In a second statement, a red-eyed and obviously irritated Starmer tried to defend the arrests as preventive actions against possible disorder. However, it was too late. The damage was already done. Human rights organisations started sending out open letters, citing worries over political overreach. The UN voiced its opinion. Global headlines cried out that Britain's democracy was collapsing. Tensions inside the government, meanwhile, boiled over. According to papers provided by Compliance Task Force whistleblowers, the arrests were pre-arranged weeks in advance. The targets were chosen from a non-cooperation watch list that was created using anonymous citizen reports and social media data. Now it was obvious. This had been planned, not a reaction. The hourly pressure on Starmer increased. There were rumours circulating that some cabinet ministers threatened to step down if the arrest orders weren't promptly lifted. Injunctions were filed by legal teams nationwide. Judges postponed decisions because they were torn between the law and public outcry. And the King never wavered in his support of the British people, remaining outspoken, resolute, and unflinching. The last straw was when a BBC reporter was able to speak with one of the farmers who had been imprisoned but had just been freed following the intervention of a local MP. "I wasn't violent," the man responded, sobbing. "I didn't disobey. Simply put, I didn't comprehend the form. I feel like a criminal now, even when I look at my children." The dam cracked with that one interview. Keir Starmer declared that the enforcement orders would be completely suspended, awaiting further legal review due to overwhelming pressure.